Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Michaela Mayer's comments on Alicia Baumgartner's drug scandal pisses me off. There's plenty of us out here competing clean and honest.
The sheer number of fighters, male fighters, female fighters, testing positive for banned substances gives the spectators, and what is this spectator sport, the impression that the sport is mostly dirty.
She screwed up big time, Mayer said on the Boxing with Chris Mannix podcast. Now everyone thinks that she needed to cheat to get here. Her credibility is shot. It's gone. Not only that, it doesn't matter the consequences she faces. It'll never take back the way it has affected the 135-pound division over the last couple of years. It has affected a lot of people in different ways. She can say she wasn't on it for my fight or Terry Harper's fight, and that's the problem with this.
It's always going to be in question, right?
People are always going to wonder. Her credibility is gone now, so we don't know, but everybody has to go through due process. I guess we'll find out when they do the investigation, but I personally don't see how she's going to get away with it. It's not like she tested positive for a diuretic, right?
She tested positive for mesterolone.
What are the benefits of using mesterolone in an athlete? It enhances the effects of testosterone, increases muscle hardness and density, decreases the side effects of steroids when taken together.
Mesterolone is not to be confused with something like clenbuterol.
It's a weight-cutting agent. Using clenbuterol doesn't necessarily do anything to enhance performance in an athlete. A boxer, it might allow them to make weight more easily. That's really the added benefit.
Making weight.
But it's not to be confused with something like mesterolone.
No.
Which is what reports indicate was found in Alicia Baumgartner's test samples.
Mayer continued.
I guess we'll find out when they do the investigation, but personally, I don't see how she's going to get away with it. It's not like she tested for a diuretic, right? These were some serious hardcore peds, and 2 of them. I feel bad for her. I think her career is fucked now, but I feel bad for her. She needs to go handle that. It's not my problem. It's her problem. It's my problem when it comes to boxing and keeping the sport pure. What pisses me off now is everyone else is now saying, oh, everyone is on that stuff. Oh, everyone is on it. Everyone is juicing now, and that's not true. There's plenty of us here competing clean and honest.
In the last 10 to 15 years of boxing, anti-doping testing has become more prevalent, and with the frequency of tests,
The more tests they're doing, the more people are getting found out, which is what gives off that jaded view that perhaps the entire sport, or at least most of it, is on something.
not according to Michaela, though. She says there's still plenty of clean athletes out there.
In reference to her domestic rival, Alicia Baumgartner, Michaela says she's tweeting the craziest things, needs to be taking this seriously.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that she isn't.
I'm sure everyone was expecting me to come out and say a whole bunch of stuff about Baumgartner, and I did want to. There was plenty that I had to say, Mayer said on the Boxing with Chris Mannix podcast, but I decided to bite my tongue. My coaches were wanting me to sort of
wait it out. Stay quiet.
because everybody was expecting me to jump on. They thought it was best if I stayed quiet a little while and see how things unfolded. This isn't helping the sport. This is damaging the sport. I think it's something she needs to address a lot more professionally as well. She's on Twitter tweeting the craziest things. Someone get her a publicist ASAP. I mean, it's very disrespectful to the sport, and she's coming off very delusional and narcissistic because she should be very concerned. She should be very worried. This is a big deal.
I think Alicia Baumgartner's most recent tweet in reference to the PED scandal is that she only actually tested positive for 1 banned substance. Initial reports indicated that there might have been 2, mesterolone and primobolan.
Alicia is now saying that she only tested positive for 1, just 1 banned substance. Which one, I'm not sure.
1 is still 1 too many to some people.
Is Alicia Baumgartner not taking this situation seriously, or is she taking it in stride? It's easy to confuse the two.
One thing Michaela's right about is that the more boxers, male boxers, female boxers, that end up testing positive for a banned substance, the more it gives the spectators the impression that the whole sport is dirty, or most of it.
Anti-doping testing in the sport of boxing has become more prevalent the last I'd say 10, 15 years. And the more testing they're doing, the more fighters are getting caught. The more times you hear about these kinds of scandals, which gives off the impression that for the longest time now, the sport has been rife with doping, and we're only now catching wind of it due to the prevalence of anti-doping tests. Every response, every story, you get the same uniform answer. I'm innocent.
Yep.
I don't know how it happened.
Yep.
We're going to do an investigation.
It's the same every single time.
It's the same uniform response in every single situation. You can't help but have a jaded view of what's really going on.
You're calmed.
This is going to follow Alicia around, and there will be special attention, special focus on how she performs once she comes back, which I anticipate probably won't be until next year.
People are going to want to see if she can stay the same fighter. Can she stay in character?
For Michaela, she's as good as guilty, and based on that, I don't think Michaela cares to share the ring with her for a second time. She doesn't feel it's necessary. As she stated, every victory she's had up until this point is now tainted based on what we don't know. If something was going on, how long was it going on? Men's Super Bantam and Featherweight news. Reigning IBF champion Luis Alberto Lopez wants Inoue after the upcoming Joet Gonzalez fight, saying Robisi can't sell. Robisi Ramirez, the Featherweight division's WBO champion, and what is his top-ranked stablemate.
Prefer to fight Inoue.
Luis Alberto El Venao Lopez
Is counting down the days until his September 15th showdown against Joet Gonzalez at the American Bank Center in Corpus Christi, Texas. Lopez's IBF featherweight title will be at stake in the ESPN televised headliner. The 29-year-old Mexican has been on a roll as of late, stopping Michael Conlan,
Knocked him the fuck out.
dethroning then-champion Josh Warrington in his previous two bouts. If all goes well against Joet Gonzalez, Lopez has his sights set on an even bigger fight.
An Inoue fight.
We would love to welcome Inoue to the featherweight division after Joet Gonzalez, Lopez's manager, Hector Fernandez de Cordova, told BoxingScene.com. We know that's the fight we want. WBO featherweight champion Rotisserie Ramirez is good, but he can't sell. The one fight that can make money and have good viewership numbers is versus Venado Lopez. We are willing to put the title on the line if Inoue is willing to put the nickname to the test. Inoue stopped former unified super bantamweight champion Stephen Fulton in their July showdown.
He's using Inoue to avoid Robisi.
It's what it is. That's what they're trying to do. The truth is that now, Inoue just got to 122 pounds, and you're already talking about him moving up to 126. Even though Inoue himself, per his handlers, he plans on staying at 122 for the foreseeable future. Fights with Marlon Tapales for the undisputed later on this year, then perhaps Luis Nery,
Jambriel Casimero, MJ Akhmadaliev.
He literally just arrived at 122 in his last fight, quite literally, and you're already talking about him moving up to 126 when there's a champion right there on your side of the street, on your side of things, that you can take on. Inoue's stay at 122 pounds may last upwards of a year to 2 years' time.
Two, really.
The time it takes to make the Marlon Tapales fight later on this year, tack on the Luis Nery fight, maybe a Casimero fight, maybe an MJ Akhmadaliev fight. What's that? 4 fights spread across 2?
Something like 2 years?
And while you're waiting for Naoya Inoue to move up in weight, what are you going to be doing for the next 2 years? Who are you going to be fighting? There's a champion right there on your side of things in Robisi Ramirez. But there's a reason that Luis Lopez's team are blowing off that idea, saying that Robisi don't sell.
I think Luis Lopez is on a great run for what it's worth, knocking out Mick Conlan, beating Josh Warrington. He's doing very well for himself, but they have an aversion to facing Robisi, and they have it for a reason. It's true. Robisi ain't got that much drawing power.
But neither does Luis Lopez. If he did, do you think that his fight with Mick Conlan would have happened in Mick Conlan's neck of the woods? His fight with Josh Warrington, would that fight have happened there if Luis Lopez had marquee value?
No.
What's Luis Lopez gonna do if he beats Joet Gonzalez? What's he gonna do for the next 2 years? Robisi Ramirez is right there. He's got a title.
You gonna drag your feet?
It's a plan. Stay on easy street, waiting for Inoue to move up to his 5th weight class.
Not implying Luis Lopez doesn't have a good resume or that he's on easy street now, because he isn't. But when you're talking about fighting Inoue, who just moved up to 122 while you're at 126, and there's a champion there at 126 that you can target.
Champion right there at 126, there's a reason you're talking about a 122-pounder.
It's not just money.
It's not just Inoue's marquee value that makes that fight an attractive fight as opposed to a Ramirez fight. It's that Ramirez, he might beat Lopez. Luis Lopez is a very athletic fighter, but Robeisy Ramirez comes from a great amateur background. He's a young guy making a name. I think he's got the skills to beat Luis.
Girlfriend's got a big ass.
What the hell does that have to do with anything?
I don't know.
Getting the impression that Luis Lopez's team is not crazy about unifying titles with Robeisy Ramirez, but because he knew he's not about to move up.
Can't use him as a crutch.
If he gets through Joet Gonzalez, there's going to be mounting pressure on him to unify titles with Rotisserie Ramirez. Upstairs in the men's lightweight division, the Dominican Republic's own Edwin De Los Santos wants Shakur Stevenson next, saying, "I want all the smoke." Edwin De Los Santos, who fights over there on the PBC side of things. It's not likely that Edwin gets an opportunity at, say, Gervonta Davis or Rolly Romero upstairs at 140.
He's got O'Hara Davies problems.
Gervonta's supposed to be fighting Isaac for a second time. The biggest fights the PBC would have to offer Edwin are not accessible to him at this time. Edwin, who's coming off of dishing out a one-sided beating to Joseph Adorno just a few months ago, but despite making his feelings known, as Stevenson, Shakur Stevenson, is looking to reel in bigger fish. Just recently, the WBC sanctioning body ordered both Stevenson and undefeated 28-year-old contender Frank Martin, who's also on the PBC side of things, to immure themselves in negotiations. For whatever reason, talks between them break down. If they do, Stevenson will be out of a dance partner again. Luckily for him, Edwin De Los Santos is willing to help out. Shakur, I hear you don't have no opponent.
I want all the smoke.
Edwin De Los Santos has been calling out Shakur Stevenson by my count for at least a year now. He's been calling him out for a while. And because Shakur's not having any luck with Devin Haney or Vasyl Lomachenko, because he's not having any luck getting the high-profile opponents in the ring, beyond what could be a Frank Martin fight.
Remember, Shakur Stevenson and Frank Martin have been ordered to fight for the vacant WBC title.
Say that fight happens and say that Shakur wins, he becomes WBC champion. I see no reason why he shouldn't fight Edwin De Los Santos, even though Edwin is over there on the PBC side of things. What this situation reminds me of is what we saw between Terrence Crawford and Felix Diaz. Many years ago, Felix Diaz, an Olympic gold medalist from the Dominican Republic.
Like Edwin is from the Dominican Republic.
Felix, who at that time was on the PBC side of things.
Like Edwin is on the PBC side of things.
Felix at that time was a bit of a high-risk, low-reward, a bit of a hot potato. Like Edwin is somewhat of a hot potato. Edwin doesn't look to be getting Gervonta Davis in the ring or Isaac Cruz. He's not going to get Frank Martin. Frank's under orders to fight Shakur.
Right.
Beyond that,
there's a parallel there between Terrence Crawford versus Felix Diaz and what could be Shakur Stevenson versus Edwin De Los Santos.
Say that Edwin's on the PBC side of things, but so was Felix Diaz, and he ended up getting the Crawford fight with the rationale being that he was a hot potato. Their high-profile fighters didn't want anything to do with Felix.
That's why they were willing to send him over.
They weren't that invested in him, and in many ways the same applies to Edwin De Los Santos. The high-profile guys at the PBC, they don't seem to want to have anything to do with him.
Make him an offer, send him over.
Shakur needs fights. Interesting ones. He's got all the talent. He's got the pedigree. But what he needs are fights. Interesting fights.
I think he beats Frank Martin. I think he beats Edwin De Los Santos.
Though seeing is believing. Moreover, seeing is better than just believing. You can believe that he beats the both of those guys, but he's got to do it.
To get the credit.
He's got to do it.
Do it.
Feel like history is repeating itself in what we're seeing between Edwin De Los Santos and young Shakur Stevenson.
Edwin better be careful what he wishes for because he just might get it.
Finally, in men's welterweight news, Terrence Crawford's longtime trainer, Bomac McIntyre, said, if Spence was weight drained, that's just bad coaching on Derek James's part.
The crutch that some people are leaning on, that the only reason Terrence won was because Errol had a hard cut and he's outgrown the welterweight division.
Brian McIntyre says, I would say that as an excuse. Again, you know he had to weigh in the same weight as Bud. He knew about the fight months before, so I mean, if he was weight drained, that's just bad coaching on Derek James's part. We all had the right amount of time to prepare for this fight. I'm not looking for no excuses or anything of that nature. Errol had no excuses. Everybody else did.
This was a fight that was about 4 or 5 years in the making.
And when you think about what happened last year, they spent the better portion of last year attempting to negotiate that fight, didn't they? That's what the news was between Terrence and Errol. So Errol himself had ample time to make the weight, not just make the weight, make it match fit. That if you are of the opinion that the weight, being weight drained, was the only reason Terrence won, that's just an excuse.
I myself think the weight is just one of many factors that saw Errol Spence Jr. get dominated by Terrence Crawford.
It's not saying that weight didn't have its role to play, among other things, but it's being overstated.
It is.
But for those stating it, you're saying that Errol Spence Jr. outgrew the welterweight division and he was weight drained? Well, whose idea was it to put distance between Errol and Terrence from the get-go, from the start? Whose idea was that, to have Errol fight all these other people ahead of the Crawford fight, which was the hotter fight at the time? Whose idea was that?
Al Heyman's.
Errol Spence Jr.'s. Wasn't Errol the one who said he wants to clean up his side of the street first? Then he'll fight Terrence Crawford? Wasn't that 4 or 5 years ago when he said that?
I picked Terrence Crawford to beat him 4 or 5 years ago just based on the styles.
If you're saying that weight was a contributing factor 4 or 5 years later, perhaps it was, but it was Errol's idea to delay the fight, Errol Spence Jr.'s and Al Heyman. So they have no one but themselves to blame for what happened, making any reference to the weight little more than an excuse.
Some feel that at 154 it'll be different because it's a better weight for Errol. To that, two-division champion Demetrius Andrade stated.
Well, when you watch the fights, Earl didn't see none of them shots coming. His head, he was like winding up for a shot, boom, right on the spot. Coming in, like the shots he didn't see coming at the end of the day. So that was amazing to see the skill level and the speed and the counter shots from Terrence to.
Do you think it'll look different at 54 though, man, or probably the same exact thing?
Yeah, skills don't change. You know what I'm saying? The skills don't change.
Well, he's saying, maybe the added weight, maybe make him feel a little bit better when he's cutting weight. You still think it'll be the same
The
exact
skills
thing?
don't change, bro. The punches selection still won't change.
So many want to make this about weight and other outlying factors when skills pay the bills, and Terrence Crawford's skills, more than anything, are what beat Errol Spence Jr.
If he were at a healthier weight, let's just say that weight were an issue and he were at a healthier weight, you know what happens? He gets hit with the same shots. Maybe he lasts a little longer.
But he still gets hit with the same shots.
For me and my money, he gets broken down. He just gets broken down later into the fight because the same holes and the same defensive deficiencies that have always been there, they would still be there at 54.
At 147, at 154, they'd still be there.
It's the way Demetrius Andrade says it is. The skills, they won't change, not based on the weight.
Excuses being made should not be levied as an indictment against Errol because Errol's not the one making them. Errol isn't making excuses. Those who banked on him to beat Terrence, they are.
Those sore fucking losers and their bad case of sour grapes.